we're going on number 2, module 2, the basic switch and end device configuration. Okay, so in the first lesson, I sort of showed you the demonstration of the packet tracer, or using packet tracer. And if you remember, we configured this layout with just a few clicks and drags and stuff like that. Very convenient, instead of physically troubleshooting a physical device and plugging right the cables and stuff like that. Very quick and easy to get this running. But like I say to my students every semester, people can get very lazy when they got packet tracer. Oh, I'll just use packet tracer. I'll just use packet tracer. But at the end of the day, when you get a job, you're not going to do things on packet tracer. You have actual physical infrastructure. So, like I said, at the end of the semester, when we do our practical exam, you will be working in pairs with a friend. You will be configuring these physical devices with a friend, with these physical cables, knowing the difference between this cable versus this cable versus this cable versus a crossover cable, and all the other types of cables that we have is very important. Okay, and in real life, in this packet tracer world, I just put a cable in, plugs in, it works. Because in packet tracer world, where there's a simulation, there's no such thing as a faulty cable. Okay, in real life, guess what? When you are in a class with students who are using these things all the time, sometimes these cables can become faulty. Okay, you notice. So, for example, this one, they usually have a clip. When you click in, it clicks and it holds it in. But these cables typically doesn't come with clips because they've been broken off already by the students or by anyone who's using it. And if they don't sit right in properly because you pulled it a little bit, it might not be physically connected. If these cable, they might have the same color jacket, but if you look at these cable and the colors are in color order, that is, you see there's different color lines, or maybe you can see later, but there's different color cables inside. If they're exactly the same color and exactly same order, that means it's a straight through cable. But if you see something that's not the exact same color on both ends, then that might be a rollover cable or crossover cable. But telling those things apart, if they're all sitting here, can become a challenge. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is, don't just rely on using packet tracer. Once you feel confident enough, use the real devices to practice. We've got those things here. We've got those desktop ones you can put on your desktop. Work with a friend, because in the final exam, you're going to be working together. You might have multiple routers, multiple switches, but you probably have to configure some and get them to work together through teamwork, okay? But that's coming up in the future anyway. But today, this topic is all about the basic configuration of the switches and end devices. So you're going to get introduced into the Cisco IOS, like I mentioned. Let's start from here. And with this particular presentation, there's a lot of it which is the command prompt, okay, where you enter the commands. For me, when I've taught this in previous years, I find that people who watch me talk about the commands don't learn the commands. When they do the activities, they learn the commands. So therefore, I'm going to go quickly through the commands, but you don't expect you to understand everything about every command on the spot. When you do the activity and you actually use the command and you see the result of the command, that's where you learn. But let's just give you some basics before you go off and do that, okay? So Cisco IOS, like I mentioned in the first lesson, Cisco IOS is the operating system that's on your switches and routers in every Cisco device. Doesn't matter which country you go to, doesn't matter which Cisco IOS Cisco device you go onto, it's a common interface. But how do we access it? All right, so the Cisco IOS is the operating system. It uses a shell. The shell is the user interface that allows you to interact with it. But the Cisco IOS is a CLI, a command line interface, which means there's no mouse, no graphics. You don't click and drag or double click or anything like that. You enter commands. Okay, firstly, if it's a command line interface, it's a lot smaller. So you don't have to install a full operating system such as your Windows operating system with all the nice pretty pictures, because at the end of the day, no one's going to sit in front of it. They're going to use it to configure it, and that's it, walk away. It will be working 24/7 a day, years and years down track. The kernel is the core of the operating system, okay? It communicates between the software and the hardware of the devices, and it manages how the hardware resources are used to meet the software requirements. And the hardware itself is actually the physical thing you can touch. Okay, if your hardware has 24 ports, then that's how many ports your physical hardware has. Just because your kernel can support like 6,000 something ports, it doesn't matter, because your hardware for that device, such as this one here, has 24 ports, and that's what it will just be. It'll be that's what we'll use. So the hardware is the physical part, underlying hardware. How do we access the IOS? All right, so let me just show you on Packet Tracer. I've shown you already sort of a shortcut, but let me just show you if you were a computer. So this is a computer. Let's pretend this is one of our desktops over there, okay? So you know that I've showed you this morning that these computers, we have these additional patch cable points here, and they run through the wall, up the thing, goes back into here, and comes out of these patch panels. Okay, different numbers, different colors, correlates to these ones here. Then we plug them in. Okay, but let's just show you, before I show you physically, let's just show you the idea of it. So one way to access the command line interface of the switch or the router is to sit at your PC and use a console cable. That's one of these blue cables, okay? And that usually plugs into a serial port back here. And let's say this is this computer, we're going to use A1, right? So that plugs into here, runs through back here, and it will come out of A1 right here. And if I want to manage this switch, I would then get a straight through cable, because I already got a console cable there. The straight through just sends everything through. I will go to the back of the switch, and there's a whole heap of extra cables back here, so I'm not sure what's left in there. But let me just push this through a little bit more. I would then, I know you guys can't see me, but I'll show you on the Packet Tracer. I'll plug into a port which is called the console port. They're usually light blue. Everything is color coded, light blue. See that cable's light blue, and the port at the back is light blue. So let me just show you on this Packet Tracer what I just did. Okay, you got your hand up? Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing. I forgot about that. Sorry, people online. I just walked in and started going. I forgot to share the video. Hopefully, you'll see that in a second. And also, you won't be able to see me in the physical classroom, unfortunately. But let me just show you what I did over there. So I've got a blue cable. See that blue cable? Let me just escape. See that blue cable? Same color as that, isn't it? Okay. So blue represents console. I went to the PC and I plugged it into in that case was a serial connection. In this case, it could be USB. It could be this RS-32, which is the serial connection. Then I went to plugged into the wall, but the wall cable ran to the back, and eventually it came out, and I plugged it into the console port of the switch, like that. So that's effectively what I just did, okay? But let me just bring up the physical and show you what I did at the back. So you couldn't see this because obviously I was behind the cabinet, but there was a port called a console port at the back, and I basically plugged it into that port. You get me, guys? So far, so good? Don't forget, if you feel like anything I'm saying is not making sense, feel free to stop me, ask me a question right then and there, okay? So I've used that cable, I've plugged it into here, and then if it was a real PC, I would install something like, PuTTY, or some sort of terminal program, Tetraterm or something like that. But on this packet tracer, I can just go to the different desktops and the terminal program. This is the speed or the rate where we're sending information, and these are the parity data bits, the parity and the stop bits. These things, the default settings are fine. And if I had a PuTTY software, so if I had something like PuTTY on my physical computer, a program like this, I can go to terminal and I can actually configure all of these things here. And if we go to serial, you see that 96, 8, 1, and parity none. It's exactly the same as here, isn't it? So in real life, in real computer, I will use something like PuTTY like this to open up a terminal, and that's using the COM1. COM1 is actually a port. If I go to my device manager, if I had my serial connection, I would have all the different ports in here. I don't think I have anything plugged into this computer, but it's one of the ports in here. Okay, so when next time I'll bring the physical cable and we'll plug it in and I'll show you. But anyway, if we have this, we'll click OK, and now we are interfacing with the switch through the IOS. Remember how I changed the host name before? That's still there because I actually used that as a demonstration. I pressed enable, typed in the command enable. That gets from a user mode, a normal level of access, to a privileged exec mode. If you like to think of it, this is normal read-only access. This is administrator access. So when I typed in the command enable, I went from normal user to the administrator user, if you like. All right, so you can see my command prompt changed from the sort of the greater than sign to the hash symbol. I know it's a bit hard for you guys to see over here from there. So use the collaborate session link to see it on your computer screen. All right, so from here, I can use commands like show IP interface brief to actually look at the IP interfaces that I've configured. And right now it's all unassigned because I haven't done any of that, have I? But if I can do, so let me just close this. So you see how that cable, the console cable, I connected to a switch. I can do the same thing with the router. Where's the console? There it is, console. So it doesn't matter which type of Cisco device there is. If you look at here, there is a console port again. Okay, so that's the back of a router like that. So now I've actually connected to that router. You notice I didn't actually you notice I didn't really disconnect my console port before the terminal. I didn't close it. So what's happened is I've actually reconnected to the router, but you can see up here, so this is the Alex router. And again, the same command that I used to get from the normal user mode to the privileged user mode works. So like I said, it's a common set of commands for the iOS regardless of the type of device. So if I show IP interface brief, you notice I'm typing the commands pretty fast, right? I'm not really typing that fast. I'm just typing the first few characters. I'm using the tab, and that will, let me delete it. So interface, INT, press tab, it completes it. If there's more than one command with the same first couple of letters, then you have to type a few more, okay? It completes it. And now it's going to show me all these interfaces, which, again, has nothing configured. So let me see if I can configure something. To configure something on the iOS, we need to go into what's called a configuration terminal. So configure terminal. Okay. And if you notice, I've got all these interfaces, right? But if you notice, I've got gigabit interface 00. That's the name of the interface. So if I want to configure that, I would have to specify that interface gigabit 0/0, just as if they wrote it there. Okay, I'm saying it's like, hey, James, I want to talk to you, or I want to configure, tell you what to do. I'm basically specifying the interface gigabit 0/0. I'm going to specify what you need to be configured as now. So now you notice that I've changed. This looks like it's configuring the interface. Configure if for interface. And you notice that it's been changing the type of command, the prompt, as I'm getting to these different levels. And obviously, this is for a lot of you the first time you're seeing all of this, and it's a lot of information to absorb. Like I said, there's nothing like doing it for yourself to learn about these things. So I'm just giving you a demonstration right now, but later on you'll have all these labs for you to do it. Like I said, bear with me. So I want to set an IP address. IP address. If I'm not sure what to do, I can press the question mark after it, and it'll give me help. See, it says you put the IP address in, or you tell it to be DHCP, which gets it from the DHCP server. I don't have a DHCP server, so I'm going to give it an IP address of 192.168.20.1. And if you remember, we talked about the router being the gateway for a network. Just before I go there, let me just double check this. All right, let me double check that I've connected to gigabit 0/0/01 connected to gigabit 0. Yeah, that was for this interface. Okay, so I was just double checking before I went too far, because if it's connected to this computer, it must be matching with that network, the IP address. So I'll give it an IP address of that with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. Done. And then we also have to make sure it's turned on, the interface. Right now it's actually down. So if you look at this, the gigabit 00 is administratively down and down. That means the interface is turned off. So I have to type in a command called no shutdown. Okay, so in Cisco commands, there's a command. If you want the opposite of it, it's no in front of it. Okay, so no shutdown means not shut down. And then it's going to bring it up. All right, so if we do that, I can press Control Z to get right back to the top. Okay, so again, you'll learn all this along the way. And if I show IP interface brief, remember that's the command that I showed before. I press the up button to go back in history of my commands. And you can see that now the gigabit 00 has an IP address. It's up, and it's up. The protocol's up, and the status is up. And if you look at this, you know that this is red. It was red here as well, but now this is all green. What that's just showing, what that effectively is showing you is the link light at the back of your computer, where your network cable gets plugged in. There's usually a link, couple of lights, an amber light and a green light, and it's flashing all the time. If it's green, it means that at the other end of that cable, it's plugged into something that's on. So they're both up. So this green symbol here, it's representing that light. Okay. So just as another thing, you have these ports. You usually have little blinking lights if they're working properly, and if they're on and running. Okay. So that's what it's representing. So if you remember, so that's, I'll close that for now. If you remember, we had a command prompt before, didn't we? And we used it to ping the server. But now our gateway, or router's got an IP address as well now, doesn't it? So should we be able to ping it? Guys, should we be able to ping the router's IP address now? Yes. Okay, good. Good answer. All right, so let's press up. Instead of 10, it's 1, isn't it? That's the IP address I gave to the router's interface gigabit 00, which is the interface that's connected to this side of the network. And there you go. We've got that ping happening. We've got the replies, so we're all very, very happy. If I didn't get the replies, then I'll be very, very sad, and I'll have to work out what the problem is. Okay, replies is good, means there's a positive outcome, but sometimes the no reply or can help you troubleshoot as well. All right, now, what if we wanted to, let's close this again, go back to the terminal. So remember, when we're on the terminal, we're actually on the router. This is a remote terminal to the router. Okay, even though it's on PC0, it's actually controlling the router. So if you remember, we had a IP address of 192.168.20.101 for the computer. We manually set that before. All right, and from the router now, can we ping the PC? Oh, we see something different, don't we? But instead of like the replies, we've got these exclamation marks. These exclamation marks means that's a reply. So in the Cisco world, Cisco IOS, that's what it means. It means successful. If I try to ping 102, for example, we know there's no 102 around, okay? You'll see, first of all, you don't get that really quickly. And secondly, instead of getting the explanation, you're getting ... which means no reply, okay? So as long as you understand that, it's the same command. You realize ping, doesn't matter which operating system you go into, Linux, Windows, Cisco, iOS, whatever, it's the same command. Okay, it's universal. It's a ICMP. It's a protocol that's universal, part of the TCP/IP suite. All right, so that's a brief overview of using the iOS. And like I said, when you go through your notes, you're going to have heaps of commands and practice for the different commands. So like I said, there's no point me talking about the commands. You'll have to do it to learn it. So that was through the console. Once you set up your device's iOS, you can actually allow access through Secure Shell, okay, SSH, or through Telnet. These are remote terminal devices. You know how here you can see I physically connected a cable to the switch, right? Those Telnet and the SSH means I don't have to be anywhere near it. I could be sitting in my office instead of being in this classroom. As long as I can ping it and the SSH and the Telnet and all that kind of things is turned on my iOS, then I can remote terminal into the iOS and be able to do all those things as well. All good with that idea? Anyone not good with that idea? It just means I don't have to be in the server room. Okay? Server room is usually very loud, very cold, very noisy. Okay, not a good place for human beings. Lovely for devices, but not good for humans. All right, so here's some terminal emulation programs that, like I mentioned. And iOS navigation, like I said, you can go to user exec mode with these prompts. You type the enable command, it switches to these ones, which gets you into the privileged exec mode, which is like the powerful mode. We can configure, go to configuration mode by using the configure terminal. That will change to config. If I'm configuring a interface, in this case the line interface, which is for SSH, Telnet, and whatever, I can type in line, whatever command it is, and then it will change to that particular interface. The one I demonstrated was configuring a network interface. So I put interface gigabit 00, and it will go to that type of prompt. And we can actually, it's the same whether it's a switch or router, and we can actually exit and go back one level. So when we type exit, we go back up one level. You see how I was in the configuration mode, exit, go back to the normal privilege exec mode. So like I said, you'll get used to it. So we go to configuration mode, but then we go to the line console, which is the configured line. That's the console port. You're configuring the console port really there. And then when we exit, we go back to the previous one. And it's the same here. Oh, but subconfig, so these 0/1, 0/0, they're what we call sub interfaces. That's just basically the name of the interface. If you want to get the right interface, you put the right name in. Also, something I forgot to show you, which is a little bit bad of me, is that all those configuration I just made is only in RAM. You guys know the difference between RAM and storage? What's the deal with storage and RAM?
So RAM stands for random access memory.
Yeah.
So basically, if you're having a look at stuff like web pages, it will keep that information stored so that there's no lag time between.
Yeah. And what's the difference between
short term?
Yeah. So basically, whatever's in RAM is temporary. When the power goes out, it disappears. What's on storage, like your hard drives, is permanent. Okay. If the power goes out, the file's still there, isn't it? Okay. Key difference. In Cisco, we'll call that volatile and non-volatile memory, because both the RAM and the memory chips on the routers and stuff are all memory. It's just one's volatile, means it's related to the power state. One's non-volatile, means it's permanent. Okay. So what I've done is just change the configuration in volatile memory. So if I actually turn this off and turn it back on, all those configuration I just made will be gone. Okay. So what I have to do is I have to save a copy of what's in the running configuration. That's the one that's being used in volatile memory, into the startup configuration, which is stored in the non-volatile memory. So we use a copy running to startup configuration. So we're taking what's being used now and putting it onto the storage, the non-volatile storage. And do I want her to save it as this file? Yes. And it's done. And I can use a command now. Show is a good command in Cisco because it shows wherever you want to see. I want to see what's running configuration. And even though I did all those configurations and stuff like that, not many actually, I can see it's a configuration file. It's all text. So gigabit 00 is what I've made the IP addressing stuff in there. You notice that, hey, well, that's what I just did, didn't I? All right. But all the other ones, I didn't do anything. All right. And if I actually show startup now, it should be identical because I just made a copy. So there it is. It's identical. And what I'd do if I was working on the real routers and devices, obviously I want to save my work along the way because if it goes out, it won't be there. But what if I actually made all this configuration, but what if I finish and someone else is going to use those things? It wouldn't be very courteous if I left all my configurations on them so they can't do their work properly, right? So we can go erase, startup configuration, and we press enter to confirm, and now it's been erased. If I do the show startup configuration now, I'll see nothing. Okay, there's nothing in there anymore. If I show the running configuration, it's still got all my configuration in there, right there. Still got it in there, the startup, because that's in memory. What we've erased is just the start. Sorry, this is running. What we've erased is the startup. Okay, so that's very important to save your configuration first of all before you lose it. And I've seen this happen many times in the practical test. People have done all the configuration, everything's working properly, but one of the steps in the test is to reload your your router or devices, which is basically restart, and they've lost everything. All right, so Randolph, I just noticed you joined the class.
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. I just thought you were online only or something like that. That's okay. That's exactly what I want you to do if you. Yeah, absolutely. So if I continue with this, there's a video for navigating between the iOS, and you can see that a little bit later. There's a command structure. There's a prompt. There's a command, and then there's what you want to do. So in this case, it's on the switch, called switch. It's in the normal user exec mode because I can tell by the prompt, and it's going to use it to show or display the IP protocol. In here, this is a different command, but I can still ping and what I want to ping. So it's always command, what. Okay, so keyword, and the argument. In this case, ping is the keyword. In this case, the IP address you want to ping is the argument. All right, so there's a couple of other things that we can boldface in the text indicates commands, keywords that are entered or shown. Italic means indicates the argument, and provides a user, it needs to provide a value. So if we look at this, ping, and then you have to provide a value. It's not literally ping IP address like that, okay? So if you enter that, it's not going to work. You must substitute this with the IP address you want to ping. So, if a command is complex, then you can put multiple arguments in here. Switch port, port security, aging. So that's a specific command. You don't need to know about that just yet. It's in the future. But then you can see there's multiple different arguments, and these are choices. Okay, in these brackets, these are choices you can enter now. We can do the help file. So if, like I showed you sort of before, if I have a command, I'm not sure what I do next, I can put the question mark and it'll give me a quick help. All right, and it will tell me that I can put an IP address or IPv6 version 6 IP address. We can also, here's another video you can watch. We can also type partial commands. You notice that the full command is configure terminal, but they just type configure t, conf t, because there's nothing else that's exactly like it. It's just like the tab completion, it will just accept it. We can use the tab to complete the command. We can use the up arrow, down arrow to get the previous commands or next commands. We can use the backspace to delete. We can use the left arrow to move the where the cursor is, so I can go back and change an argument or something. We can, if we see a prompt called more, that means there's show me a page at a time of information. If I just press space, it'll go to next page, next page, next page. All right. So what we're going to do, like I said, all these commands, there's no point me going through all of these commands and so forth. It's better if you practice them.